All right. Yeah, so thank you for joining us during the lunch session. I know it's the last day of a very exciting conference. I hope everybody's been having a good time so far. I'm Justin Forth with Pub Native. We're going to talk about monetizing your games through native ads. Just a quick little background on me. First of all, that is my favorite picture of myself. I think it's the only good one I have. I'm the head of global business development for Pub Native. We recently launched about 3 weeks ago. Aplift, the mobile games marketing company some of you may be familiar with, invested in us and got us on our start. Before that, I was with Aplift and GetJar, doing both user acquisition and monetization for games and non-games as well. I do like to throw in that I'm a big New York Jets fan. I don't know if that's relevant to anybody, but. So what we're going to talk about today is probably the hottest buzzword in the industry, in the advertising industry right now, is native advertising for mobile apps. There are definitely a good history of how games have been monetized so far, free to play. We're going to look through that a little bit. We'll talk about the analytics that are really important as you go into how you're going to come up with your monetization system. We'll also talk a little bit about how hot native is and go into maybe some of the do's and don'ts and conceptions and misconceptions of native advertising. And my favorite part is talking about no SDK and no bullshit when it comes to getting this done. So right now, the current ecosystem, there are definitely only a few ways you can monetize your games if you're doing a free-to-play game. In-app purchases, rewarded video, and advertising. So when you break it down, you're looking at the in-app purchases. That's where most game publishers try to make their revenue. I think that's where a lot of the value they see for their user experience comes from. But it's hard. It's not easy to convince a user to pay money in their game. Not everybody's a Candy Crush. Not everybody can get millions of dollars per day, especially when only 1.5% of players on average are going to monetize within your game. So that's where the rewarded video and actions and incentivized world came into play, where you can monetize your users by incentivizing them to do an action, maybe install another app, maybe fill out a survey online. But once they complete the action, they'll be rewarded with something within your game, and that's a good way to make some money on your end. And other than that, advertising is the rest of it, whether it's for app installs, maybe cross promo, and branding campaigns. Those are kind of the two splits we have right here. But like we said, the analytics are crucial. So while in-app purchases at this time are getting a bigger chunk of the pie in terms of overall revenue, what does that say to the rest of the user base? So if you look at where the revenue is coming from right now in the App Store, about 77% of all app revenue is coming from in-app purchases, from paid apps. A little chunk, maybe 4% of all our revenue is coming from paid apps. In-app purchase revenue in paid apps is making a small chunk, but the majority of it that's not advertising is done through in-app purchases, right? The rest of the sphere is made up of just regular ads. But out of that user base, only 1.5% of the people that are going to monetize. So it's really a really tiny number of the user base. So what are you going to do with the rest of the users? Are you just going to not try to make any money off of them? Probably not a good idea. But like we said, in-app purchases is a really hard monetization model. You want to worry about the key factors of the game. Are you disrupting the user experience? How can you supplement it and still monetize from it? When you have close to 99% of your user base that are not monetizing, there's got to be a better way to do it. So that's where ads come in, right? It helps you take advantage of this huge user base you hopefully have and still make some money from that. But what's really important is the analytics behind it. You need to know when is an appropriate time to serve an ad to some users. Is it after they get to level 3 and they tried 5 times and they're going to give up? Do you show them an ad right before they leave? You need a player relationship management tool that can help you track where your users are coming and going in the game. At what point are they potentially going to make a purchase? At what point does it make sense to show an ad? These can really help you with those non-monetizing users to kind of get the most out of them. So what kind of ad are you going to show? Are you just going to throw a banner in there? Are you going to throw an interstitial in there? That seems to be the way that most people are going. But right now, native is the new direction. Native is hot right now. So when we look at native advertising, I think that probably means something different to everybody in this audience. There's a lot of people trying to define it, and they're defining it differently. There's a pretty big effort in non-games to standardize native advertising with locked-in formats, maybe the in-stream, the feed type native advertisements. And it's very contextual. Is it native if it's in this kind of app? Probably. But it's not going to make sense for a game necessarily. So you need to be considering, if you're looking into native advertising, how is this kind of format going to really help my user experience? Does it fit in my user experience? If you look at some of the solutions out there right now, and they have 5, maybe 6 formats that you can plug in via SDK, how is that going to fit into your user experience here? How is that size going to just plug right in? Maybe you can put the character of the game behind it. Maybe it looks a little bit more like part of the game. But is it really? If it's standardized, how can it really be native? That's kind of one of the questions that we asked ourselves when Pub Native came around, is how can you standardize something that's meant to be so contextual, so deep within something? It makes sense for the advertisers to have it standardized, maybe. But for your user experience as a publisher, as a developer, I don't think that makes sense. So like I said, in-stream may work for messaging apps. These preset formats that companies are putting out there right now, they may work for a news feed app. They may work for a social network. I don't know if they work for games. I don't really think they do. It's really about adapting to your user experience. When we work with publishers, with game publishers, we sit down with their product team, we sit down with their design team, and we run ideas back and forth about, hey, how can we build this into your experience without pissing off your users? So usually a pop-up ad is going to piss me off, probably you as well. So we want to embed it into the user experience, truly make it native. And that's where we came up with this kind of saying that native advertising is a framework, not a format. It needs to be something that's collaborative between the publishers and the advertising networks. In some cases, a banner might be the right integration. It might be contextually native. Probably not for a game. So why don't we take a look at some successful examples of how native advertising in games has actually come to work. So this is one of the examples that we just recently launched with a company called WebLinks. This is the game Sweets Mania. This is using some of the contextual background of the game to plug in a kind of banner, right? So it is still slightly a banner, but you'll see that it's the character of the game, and it doesn't really seem like something that's popping up and distracting you. It's kind of tucked away, part of what you might experience in the game normally. I think this is a half step towards full native. The next example I'm going to show you is probably my favorite example of what we've done, and it'll give you some context too into what you might be able to do in your type of game. So this game here is called Happy Mall by Happy Labs. It's kind of like a city builder game, except for in this case, you are building a mall. So you can go around, you can buy a burger here, you go stop by the bookstore. You guys have seen these games before. It's a pretty common model. But what we did here to kind of change the game a little bit is we put these billboards in. I think that's native. I think that's part of the user experience. I think you're in a mall, you might expect to see a billboard, right? I think it's also very contextual, right? We can choose what types of ads we put there. It doesn't have to be other game installs. Right now we've got Candy Crush and a few other games being advertised there. But like you can see, this is truly a part of the experience. Let's go through the flow of how it actually goes here. So part of these games, these kind of city builder games, is you're going to touch everything on the screen. You're going to see if you can build something here. You're going to see if you can add something to this part here. So the user is going to click this at some point. We got to look at the analytics behind it. Is it fair to kind of charge the advertiser for clicks and impressions if we know they're going to click every single thing they see? We don't think so. So we built the second step, which makes it clear to the user, hey, you just clicked on an ad. Do you want to continue with it? This is Isabel. She is the owner of the mall. She's recommending this game to you. Another part of the experience is actually incorporating the characters into it. I'll go into a little bit of the details of how our API works. So typically, like I mentioned, with some of the SDKs that exist, you might get to plug in, a color of your theme of the game to slightly customize it. Here what we're doing is we're sending over different elements via API to be built into the game however needed. So we call them our building blocks. For example, the title of the game, some custom creative, a call to action, an icon. We have over 20 different elements that can be passed over and built into any style format. So that's where the truly native aspect comes in, is however you can shape these into your game, we can make it work for you. That's pretty native, right? In my opinion, it's the best example I've seen, but there's going to be more to come. This is only the beginning. All right. That comes to my favorite line, which is no SDK, no bullshit. How many of you guys are developers or publishers? Okay. So how many ad networks and services have offered you a new SDK that's going to change your eCPM and it's going to revolutionize the way you guys serve ads? I'm sure you get dozens, if not hundreds of those a week. I was one of those guys once sending you those emails. And I know how painful it is for developers and publishers to deal with SDK fragmentation. I've got 20 SDKs in my app. If one of their servers crashes, it could bring my app down. It makes my app clunky and slower. You have 12, 15, 20 of these plugged in. It might not be the best way to do it. That's why we went with the API here. No templates, multiple formats, unlimited options here. And it's all on the server side. So if you want to switch something out, switch one of the creatives out, it's all server side. It's lightweight. It's low development resources. In this case, let me go back to the only development resource that we required here for Happy Labs was just to build this little slot right here. They did it overnight. So the level of integration can depend on how deep do you want to go. And we work with, like I said, we work with the design team, we work with the product team to see, hey, what makes sense? And in a lot of cases, there's already real estate within an app that's perfect for something to be plugged right in. And we can do that with our API. The whole idea here is, as an app developer, an app publisher, you know your user experience, you know your user base better than an ad network can, better than a one-size-fits-all solution. That's kind of why we think native advertising needs to be against that. This is kind of the pub native formula over here is we work with over 20 parameters. If you want to target based on age, gender, if you want to target different image sizes, if you want to throw in app store ratings, if you want to throw in app install campaigns, if you want to throw in branding campaigns, whatever it is that the publisher is looking for to get the best understanding of their user experience, that's what we want to do to work with them. Again, it's not up to us to tell you what your user experience should feel like. We want to work with you to complement it. We want to be an addition to it that's going to help you monetize your users without pissing them off. So at Pub Native, we believe in no SDK and no bullshit. We believe in the whole idea of full customization and truly native ads. So these are some of the really important things to consider if you're looking into a native solution. Is it truly customizable? Is it truly native? And most importantly, what is it going to do to my user experience? Those are kind of our key points here. Anybody have any questions about this experience, about what you're working with native right now, what we've seen coming and going?
Is there a standard, I guess, maybe library of experiences that you target in games? Like, I guess I would be wrong. I just look at an orthogonal ad.
Yeah, so we have, basically all the image sizes you can imagine, they can fit into your game, right? In a certain way. So it really is a case-by-case example. And when we work with publishers, they want benchmarks because they're used to benchmarks from banners and they're used to benchmarks from interstitials. But when we're basically creating new impressions within a game. We're creating whole new formats that can't be benchmarked against anything but themselves. So it's really variable.
I mean, sort of like when you say we, the creator of content, or we? Oh, you can't hear me. Sorry. You guys hear me? So I guess if you have a great game and
Yep.
you want to have ads in the game that are uniquely organic to your game, where is sort of the balance between the expertise you guys have
Sure.
as Pub Native,
Sure.
right, and the expertise that I guess the innate developer might or might not have of how to create ads that
Yeah, and so part of that comes into the kind of the analytics that you're getting on your players, where you're knowing, okay, these are the ones I should start with. These are the ones I should target first. We like to make it as much help as possible. There are certain publishers that really do have a full understanding on exactly what their users are looking for. In that case, we like to step aside and have them say, okay, these are the things we want. We want A, B, C, D, E, F, G. In a maybe less experienced developer or publisher, we will sit down with them and we'll show them all the examples we have. And we'll work with the elements that we know we can pass through, and we'll play through their game. We have a great design team that'll draw these mock-ups, and we'll really work with you. So it needs to be a combination. I don't think there is kind of a split line. We also have some sample code published on GitHub right now, so your team can go and play around with it and see what works. A lot of people are starting on small sample sizes, maybe 5-10% of their traffic in one country, to see how the response is. And that's also a really important fact too, is you need to be able to do some kind of A/B testing before you launch this full scale. Because it might, it's really going to be completely different for every single publisher. Yeah.
Are you guys mediating? Are you guys mediating the demand
The
or
demand?
advertisers?
Yeah, that's a great
do you have an
question.
ad sales team, and
Yeah.
then are you apps only, kind of unrelated? Are you apps only, or are you mobile web as well?
So we are expanding into mobile web this month. We do have an exchange. We call it the Pub Native Exchange that mediates at this point about 6 different networks. Most of them are CPI, game installs, and app installs. We have just 2 weeks ago opened up into CPM branded deals. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is we want to do what goes first for the publisher. So we work with a lot of games, we work with a lot of non-games. And games seem to be a little bit more interested in the CPI model. It's a familiar ecosystem, but maybe a news app or a social feed type of app is going to want some kind of branded advertising. We offer both. Also, a lot of larger publishers, a lot of larger apps and games have their own direct sales teams. We are allowing them to plug that right into our exchange as well. So we don't, we want to put the control in the publisher's hands.
Now, what about context? How are you helping developers?
Contextual targeting?
Yeah, how are you helping them decide which ad to show?
Sure. I mean, we use the data that they provide. So if they know, for example, that their user base is largely female, age 18 to 30, these are parameters that can be passed through the API. We also have an algorithm on our back end that's going to take a look after 1 or 2 weeks and really start to get a feel for the traffic to figure out which from our demand, which is the best ad to serve. When it comes to the actual integrations, is that what you're referring to, the integrations or the demand? Yeah, when it comes to the actual integrations, it comes down to kind of check and review process where we'll make, in some cases, 3, 4, 5 rounds of mock-ups, working on our design team, send it back, have their design team look it over, say, okay, is this something that we can fit into our different elements? And we'll go back and forth till we think we have a happy solution. Like I mentioned over here, it's important to test on a small sample, use your player analytics to measure the response, and then decide how you want to scale from there. Some metrics for you? Yeah, like I was mentioning earlier, it's kind of hard to benchmark. What we're doing here is trying to work with the publishers to create a standard impression measurement, because when the impressions are all different sizes and how are you going to really track over all these different formats? We're doing a lot of it by unique user is the easiest way. In some cases, we're seeing in these games $2 to $7 eCPM, which is quite a range. It depends fully on how it's integrated. We're seeing click-through rates 4, 7, high as 10%, definitely higher than banners, if not double in most cases. And then depending on if it's an app install campaign or not, we're seeing our baseline conversion rate is about 4%. So hands down, the news is that it's performing better than banners. The question is, how do we fit it into the user experience? And how do we scale it within your user experience?
So do you create a growing library of custom ad units? Like if someone comes up with the diagonal sign or the
Sure.
flag with the movie that plays on it, is that like a library that's growing, or?
So basically what we're doing is we build our kind of catalog of our building blocks, right? And our building blocks build it into the game. So the ads are going to be served based on what we have with our building blocks. So they're not restricted to one size. You can use as many of the elements as you want into the unit. That's how we're able to scale the advertising side.
What are the other key, I guess, dimensions of the, like, I'll ask the question that's on my mind, a leading question. Are there time-based ads, like nighttime ads, where with a custom unit, it only plays at night?
Yeah,
for
that's
example,
the kind of contextual logic behind that is fully up to the publisher when they trigger what kind of ad, and that can go into our targeting. So you can say something along those lines. You can say, hey, we want at night we know that our users are more likely to want an RPG style game. So you can, at the time of day, change your API call to suggest that that's the kind of ad you'd like.
Other questions? All right, well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.